It's Wednesday, Tuesday. This meme actually, this one got to me. But what if you met the right man who worshipped and adored you, who would do anything for you, who would be your devoted slave? Then what would you do? I'd pity him.
What if, in spite of the feminist and women's rights rhetoric, that women in industrialized nations are not the ones who are oppressed? They're not the ones who are oppressed, but instead, they're actually the ones who exploit a well-established system of manipulating men. They're not the ones being oppressed. They're the ones doing the oppressing. What if? I'm just posing a question here. That's what this book by Esther Vilar posits in The Manipulated Man, which was written in 1971. Esther Vilar writes, men have been trained and conditioned by women, not unlike the way Pavlov conditioned his dogs into becoming their slaves. As compensation for their labors, men are given periodic use of a woman's vagina. Her book contends that young boys are encouraged to associate their masculinity with their ability to be sexually intimate with a woman, and that a woman can control a man by socially empowering herself to be the gatekeeper to his sense of masculinity. Vilar states that this has been going on for quite some time. So one of the reasons that women don't mind being viewed as the weaker sex is because then less is expected of them, and they are given more leeway in society than men. They're weak. What can they accomplish? According to Esther Vilar, most women, this is, a general theory, but they are gold diggers, and they attempt to extract money and other material resources from men. One means by which women control men to effect this transfer of resources is praise. Women dole out praise to men only when their needs are met in some way. Another means of manipulation is the calculated use of emotional displays, crying on demand. Vilar claims that women can control their emotional reactions, whereas men cannot, that women create overly dramatized emotional reactions to get their way. They blackmail men emotionally. Women also use sex as a tool of manipulation and control, but also traditional concepts of love and romance, which are seen more positively than sex, are also used to control men's sexual lives. Yeah, baby, I love you. That men gain nothing from marriage, and that women coerce them into it under the pretense that it fulfills their romantic desires. I want to go back to that women are the weaker sex, right? So women, I know a particular woman who is useless, who can't tie her shoes, she can't, make cereal, she can't turn on a light switch. She's not a smart person, okay? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's her sort of shtick, is she's a klutz. And she's stupid, and she's incapable of doing any goddamn thing. She's the most hopeless, helpless person in all of humanity. And that's why, because she can do nothing, it's up to the man to do everything. Everything. She's going to do nothing. She will put nothing, on the table at all. It's all up to him. Because she's a weak little woman. What can this weak little baby child do? This weak baby child can't do nothing. Women also look at other women's means of control, and they adopt their tactics on how to handle their men. But since they're weaker, they can do nothing, and that's why the man has to do everything. Everything? Everything. Everything? Everything. So why would the women change their situation? They have it good, right? Just to, every once in a while do a load of laundry and let him have sex with you, which is fun for her anyways, but because she could regulate a little bit better. Why would women give that situation up? Why would they give that up? For Esther Vilar, since appealing to women isn't going to change anything because they're unsympathetic to the plight of men, they don't care. So appealing to women to give up their free ride, to give up their money bags, to give up their cash cows, to give up their, work horses, to give up their obedient slaves, why would they do that, right? They got a slave that'll do anything and everything for them and provides an entire life for them. Why would they give that up? So she argues that, Esther Vilar argues that it's up to men to see past the deception and the emotional blackmail and then subject it to open criticism before any meaningful change can occur. And I basically agree with her criticism of men. Men are all too willing for some ass, to be a slave. List of issues that she had recognized in the original book to be men's most significant disadvantages compared to women. Number one, men are conscripted, women are not. So when there was a draft, it was the men who had to go fight the wars. It's the men who still have to sign up for selective service today. So the draft is still around. My name is sitting on some, scroll waiting for these old politicians to send me overseas to go dive to steal some poor nation's oil. 2, men are sent to fight in wars. Women are not. 3, men retire later than women, even though due to their lower life expectancy, they should have the right to retire earlier. 4, men have almost no influence over their reproduction. For males, there is neither a pill nor abortion. They can only get the women. They can only get the children. Women can only get the children that women want them to have. 5, men support women. Women never or only temporarily support men. 6, men work all their lives. Women work only temporarily or not at all. Even though men work all of their lives and women work only temporarily or not at all, on average, men are poorer than women. Women spend 75% of the disposable income. 8, men only borrow their children. Women can keep them. As men work all their lives and women do not, men are automatically robbed of their children in cases of separation with the reasoning that they have to work. Well, you can't be with your kid. You got to go work. You got to provide for everybody, for her alimony, so she can sit on her ass and not do. Alimony is like buying hay for a dead horse. Groucho Marx. So let's go to this anecdote here. It starts out with the slave's happiness, okay? We're getting into this. The Manipulated Man by Esther Vilar. The lemon-colored MG skids across the road, and the woman driver brings it to a somewhat uncertain halt. She gets out and finds her left front tire flat. Oh no, she's got a flat tire. Without wasting a moment, she prepares to fix it. She looks towards the passing cars as if she's expecting somebody. Recognizing this standard international sign of woman in distress, weak female let down by male technology, a station wagon pulls up. The driver sees what is wrong at a glance and says comfortingly, "Don't worry there, little missy. Don't worry there, little missy. We'll fix that up in a jiffy. Don't you worry." His determination, he asked her for her jack. So you got a jack, and of course, she doesn't know anything about a jack, where it's at. She can't find it. He does not ask her if she's capable of changing the tire because he already knows. She's 30 years old. She's dressed really nice, has all that makeup on. She can't change the tire, and even if she could, she doesn't want to get herself dirty. She'd rather you get dirty, right? And he does it. He wants to be her Superman. So she can't find a jack. He gets his own, and he gets his tools. 5 minutes later, the job is done, and the punctured tire is properly stowed away. His hands are covered with grease. She offers him an embroidered handkerchief. Right, here's a nice, pretty handkerchief. You want to wipe your hands with it? Don't you worry. He politely refuses. He's got his own rack for such occasions in his toolbox. Woman thanks him profusely, right, apologizing for her typical feminine helplessness. Her helplessness, uselessness. Oh my God, I can't do anything. You got to do everything for me. I can't do nothing, so you got to do everything. Everything? Everything. Everything? Everything. Now, she might have been there till dark, she says, had the man not stopped. He makes no reply, and as she gets back into the car, he gallantly shuts the door for her. Oh, look at that. What a nice gentleman. Through the wound-down window, he advises her to have a spare to have her tire patched at once. And she promises to get her garage man to see to it that very evening, and then she drives off. The man collects his tools. He goes back to his own car. He wishes he could have washed his hands, his shoes. He's been standing in the mud, changing the tire. The man's hands are all greasy, and his shoes are all muddy. And now he's got to hurry up to get to his next appointment. He didn't have time to go, help somebody else. And as he starts his engine, he thinks, women, one's more stupid than the next. He wonders what she would have done if he had not been there to help. He puts his foot on the accelerator and drives off faster than usual. There is a delay to make up. After a while, he starts to hum to himself. In a way, he is happy. And almost any man would have behaved in the same manner. And so would most women, without thinking, simply because men are men and women so different from them. A woman will make use of a man whenever there's an opportunity. What else could the woman have done when her car broke down? She has been taught to get a man to help. Thanks to his knowledge, he was able to change the tire quickly and at no cost to herself. Thanks to no cost to herself. This is genius. He is genius. Yeah, true. The man ruined his clothes. He put his business in jeopardy, endangered his own life by driving too fast afterwards. Had he found something else wrong with her car, however, he would have repaired that too. That is what his knowledge of cars is for. Why should a woman learn to change a flat tire when the opposite sex, half of the world's population, is able and willing to do it for her? Women let men work for them, think for them, and take on the responsibilities. In fact, they exploit them. Yet, since men are strong, intelligent, and imaginative, while women are weak, unimaginative, and stupid, why isn't it men who exploit women? Could it be that strength, intelligence, and imagination are not prerequisites for power, but merely qualifications for slavery? Could it be that the world is not being ruled by experts, but by beings who are not fit for anything else? By women. And if this is so, how do women manage it so that their victims do not feel themselves cheated and humiliated, but rather believe them to be themselves what they are least of all, masters of the universe? How do women manage to instill in men this sense of pride and superiority that inspires them to ever greater achievement? Why are women never unmasked? And if this is so, how do women manage it so that their victims do not feel themselves cheated and humiliated, but rather believe? How do women manage it so that their victims do not feel themselves cheated and humiliated, but rather believe to be themselves what they are least of all, masters of the universe? Masters of the universe. He changed her tire. If he was off to the side of the road and he had a flat tire, would she stop and help him out? Of course not. Fuck that guy. Right? Fuck him. I'm not going to help him. And yet he's all too willing, all too happy, and he feels good about it. Helping a woman in need, a damsel in distress. You got any hints? I don't know. I don't know. Birth, men and women have the same intellectual potential. There is no primary difference in intelligence between the sexes. Also a fact that potential left to stagnate will atrophy. Women do not use their mental capacity. They deliberately let it disintegrate. After a few years of sporadic training, they revert to a state of irreversible mental torpor. Why do women not make use of their intellectual potential? For the same reason that they do not need to. It's not essential for their survival. Theoretically, it's possible for a beautiful woman to have less intelligence than a chimpanzee and still be considered an acceptable member of society. You don't know your left from your right. You don't know the three branches of God. So she doesn't know how to count to 10. She doesn't know how to tie her shoes. She doesn't know how to drive a car. She doesn't know how to do any of this, right? But it's okay. She's beautiful, right? She's a gorgeous woman. She's got big tits. Why does she need to learn anything? She can be dumb as fuck. She's got big tits. By the age of 12 at the latest, most women have decided to become prostitutes, or to put it another way, they have planned a future for themselves which consists of choosing a man and letting him do all the work. And in return for his support, they are prepared to let him make use of their vagina at certain given intervals. The minute a woman has made this decision, she ceases to develop her mind. A woman will certainly feel happy when she has an orgasm, but it is not the most intense pleasure she knows. It's not as important as getting a bag of Cheetos or going to a cocktail party, doing all these important socialization activities, buying a new pair of aubergine-colored patent leather boots. These are all things that are much higher than having an orgasm. She can postpone her orgasm and use sex as a weapon in order to bludgeon that man into being her slave. And will she respect him for it? No, just like Wednesday, Tuesday, she'll pity him. So for Esther Vilar, women can't or won't. They're unwilling to change. Only woman can break the vicious cycle of man's manipulation and exploitation, but she won't do it. There's absolutely no compelling reason why she should. It's useless to appeal to her feelings, for she is callous and knows no pity. And so the world will go on, sinking deeper and deeper into this morass of kitsch, barbarism, and inanity called femininity. And man, that wonderful dreamer, will never awaken from his dream, right? I'm your dream. I'm the one and only. This is everything, right? Whenever you see a very beautiful, gorgeous, cute picture of a woman, she is posing. The title of it should be Your Life, okay? That's what she's going for. She's after your life. That's what she wants. That's why she goes through all that effort. To seems Jack London's The Call of the Wild, you had three characters, Hal, Charles, and Mercedes. Now, Mercedes is this spoiled, controlling and helpless woman. Hal and Charles, one is the brother and one is her husband. So here she is, this, it was her custom to be helpless, and she had all of her stuff, right? She couldn't leave anything behind. They're in the untamed north, right? The Canadian tundra, the cold, and she's just carrying on all of her shit. She wants all of her outfits and all of her pots and pans, and she just weighs the sled down more than anything else and anybody else, and she won't, relinquish any of her stuff. She's also given more food to the dogs in the beginning than what she should, and they run out later on because she'd already doled out the food. Moment when Mercedes, she wants to ride in the sled, and she wants to keep on riding in the sled the whole time, right? She wants to not only pack all of her shit on the sled for the dogs to, wear themselves out and get weaker and weaker, but she also wanted to sit her fat ass on top of the sled, and she wanted to be toted. She wanted to be carried everywhere. She wanted to be catered to, and just like a queen, right? Just having like her slaves carry her. And when eventually, after the dogs were getting tired and they're running out of food, one of the men, Hal or Charles, says, you need to get off, and she throws a tantrum, and she's like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So she sits in the snow, and then they go down the, about a mile down the path, and then they have to turn back around and pick her up. So she won, right? She won that power struggle. She got what she wanted, right? She needed to be catered. She was helpless. She needed them to do everything for her. She was going to also be controlling and manipulative and demand, make sure she get her, their mistakes are quite apparent, but instead of taking action, instead of trying to find solutions to their problems, what they do is they bicker and they feud, they fight over old grudges and trifles instead of dealing with the problems at hand. Now, while the civilized world could even tolerate it and maybe even smile at such absurdity, right, all poor folks, but they'll get by, but the wild doesn't have any such mercy. In the cold of the Klondike, incompetence is deadly. Not only for the three foolish Americans, but also for the team of dogs, for the humans' poor planning had brought them to the brink of starvation, and they were weak. Hal, Charles, and Mercedes were weak and foolish creatures, and their folly has its own reward. They died in the icy waters of a northern river. So, because they listened to a spoiled brat, a child who was controlling, they all died. old institutions of house and home are not yet so obviously outdated and derelict that they can't justify relinquishing all their intellectual pursuits and renouncing all their claims to better jobs. One does wonder, however, what will happen when housework is still further mechanized, when there are enough good nursery schools nearby, or when, as must occur before long, men discover that children themselves are not essential. If only man would stop for one moment in his heedless rush towards progress and think about this state of affairs, he would inevitably realize that his efforts to give woman a sense of mental stimulation have been totally in vain. It is true that woman gets progressively more elegant, more well-groomed, more cultured, but her demands on life will always be material, never intellectual. Has she ever made use of the mental processes he teaches at his university to develop her own theories? Does she do independent research in the institutes he has thrown open to her? Someday it will dawn on man that woman does not read the wonderful books with which he has filled his libraries. And though she may well admire his marvelous works of art in museums, she herself will rarely create, only copy. Even the plays and films, visual exhortations to woman on her own level to liberate herself, are judged only by their entertainment value. They will never be a first step to revolution. Esther Vilar, this is a woman writing this in 1971, so this is a 50-year-old book. When a man believing woman is equal, woman his equal, when a man believing woman his equal realizes the futility of her way of life, he naturally tends to think that it must be his fault, that he must be suppressing her. But in our time, women are no longer subject to the will of men. Quite the contrary. They have been given every opportunity to win their independence. And if, after all this time, they have not liberated themselves and thrown off their shackles, we can only arrive at one conclusion. There are no shackles to throw off. It is true that men love women, but they also despise them. Anyone who gets up in the morning fresh and ready to conquer new worlds, with infrequent success admittedly because he's got to earn a living, is bound to despise someone who simply just isn't interested in such pursuits. Contempt may even be one of the main reasons for his efforts to further the mental development. Contempt may even be one of the main reasons for his efforts to further the mental development of a woman. He feels ashamed of her and assumes that she too must be ashamed of herself. So being a gentleman, he tries to help. Men seem incapable of realizing that women entirely lack ambition, desire for knowledge, and need to prove themselves, all things which to him are a matter of course. They allow men to live in a world apart because they do not want to join them. Why should they? The sort of independence men have means nothing to women. The sort of independence men have means nothing to women because women don't feel dependent. They are not even embarrassed by the intellectual superiority of men because they have no ambition in that direction. There's one great advantage which women have over men. They have a choice. They got a choice between the life that a man leads or the life of a dim-witted, parasitic luxury item. There are too few women who would not select the latter, but men do not have this choice. If women really felt oppressed by men, they would have developed hate and fear for them, as the oppressed always do, but women do not fear men, much less hate them. If they really felt humiliated by men's mental superiority, they would have used every means in their power to change the situation. If women really felt unfree, surely at such a favorable time in their history, they would have broken free of their oppressors. In Switzerland, one of the most highly developed countries of the world, where until recently women were not allowed to vote in a certain canton, it's reported the majority of women were against introducing the vote for women. The Swiss men were whatever men set about to impress women with counts for nothing in the world of women. Only another woman is of importance in her world. Of course, a woman will always be pleased if a man turns to look at her, and if he is well-dressed or drives an expensive sports car, so much the better. Her pleasure may be compared to that of a shareholder who finds that his stocks have risen. It will be a matter of complete indifference to a woman if he is attractive or looks intelligent. A shareholder is hardly likely to notice the color of his dividend checks. But if another woman should turn to look, a rare occurrence, for her own judgment is infinitely more remorseless than that of a man, her day is made. She has achieved the impossible, the recognition, admiration, and love of other women. Yes, only women exist in a woman's world. The women she meets at church, at parent-teacher meetings, in the supermarket, teacher meetings, in the supermarket, the women with whom she chats over the garden fence, the women at parties or window shopping in the more fashionable streets, those she apparently never seems to notice. These women are the measure of her success or failure. Women's standards correspond to those in other women's heads, not to those in the heads of men. It is their judgment that really counts, not that of men. A simple word of praise from another woman, and all those clumsy, inadequate male compliments fall by the wayside, for they are just praises out of the mouths of amateurs. Men really have no idea in what kind of world women live in. Their hymns of praise miss all the vital points. Of course, woman wants to please man as well. Don't let us forget, after all, that he provides the material means. But that is much more easily done. Men have been conditioned to react to a certain degree of differentiation. They expect women to conform to certain types of sex symbols created by makeup, and other standard trappings: long hair, painted lips, tight-fitting sweaters, mini skirts, sheer stockings, high heels, all done in a moment. It is those living works of art which are beyond man's comprehension. Those creatures walking the fashionable streets of Paris, Rome, and New York, the skill of eyeliner and shadow expertly applied, the choice of lipstick and its application, with or without lip brush in several layers or in only one, the compromise to be achieved between the pros and cons of false eyelashes, the matching of a dress, a stole, or a coat with the lighting. All this is an art requiring expert knowledge of which man has no conception. A man lacks any kind of appreciation for this. He has not learned to interpret the extent of female masquerades, and he cannot possibly evaluate these walking works of art. To achieve perfection in such skill needs time, money, and infinitely. When a woman dresses, she considers a man, to a slight extent, the extent necessary to hold him and to encourage him to provide in the widest sense for her. Every other investment is aimed at other women. Man has importance only as the provider. If a firm wants to get hold of a specialist in some field, it will flatter and entice him in every possible way until he weakens. Once the contract is signed, his employers can relax. Their leverage over him continues to increase. A woman behaves in much the same way with a man. She gives her man just enough rope to ensure his preferring life by her side to breaking his contract with her. A woman may in fact be compared to a firm in a number of ways. After all, a firm is only an impersonal system aimed at achieving a maximum profit. And what else does a woman do? Without any emotion, love, hate, or malice, she is bound to the man who works. She has become involved only if he threatens to leave her. Then her livelihood is at stake, and this is a rational reaction with a rational cause. It can be rashly dealt with and adjusted to. She can always place another man under contract. How different is her reaction from those of a man who finds himself in a similar position? He's racked by jealousy, humiliation, self-pity, but she is emotionless. A woman would hardly ever feel jealous in such a situation, since the man is leaving her only for another woman and not in order to be free. In her eyes, he has not improving his position in any way. The adventure of a man's love for a new woman is nothing more than a nuisance. She has seen it all from the angle of the entrepreneur who loses his best worker to a competitor. As far as a woman is concerned, the heartache involved is nothing more than a reaction of letting good business go elsewhere. Consequently, it's quite absurd for any man to think his wife is being faithful merely. If women were free of financial cares, the majority of them would probably prefer to spend their lives in the company of other women rather than with men. And not because they're all lesbians. What men call lesbian tendencies probably have little to do with a woman's sexual drive. No, the sexes have almost no interest in common. What, besides money, can bind a woman to a man? Women make ideal living companions for each other. Their feelings and instincts are retarded at the same primitive level, and there are almost no individualistic or eccentric women. It isn't difficult to imagine the paradise they would create together and how exciting their existence would be, even if the intellectual level was appallingly low. But who would worry about it? To someone from outer space, surely men would appear infinitely more worthy of admiration than women, for man has intelligence as well as beauty. Throughout the centuries, man's standard of... There's this woman, Diana Davidson, and she explains that how extensive women's manipulation goes. It's almost like they're testing boundaries. They want to see how far they can push this man. You know, they study him. They try to see where they can push, where they can prod, how they can do this, how they can do that. It's all about studying him to manipulate him, to put him underneath her thumb. Like, you know, she said, that author of The Manipulated Man, Esther Vilar, like what she said, that women only care about other women's perspective. Only other women are actual women. And that reminds me of this same person I'm thinking of. So there was an incident where somebody came in my house. There was this incident where I had somebody come in my house. I didn't know who they were, and they started threatening me. And so I had to kick them out, and then they started, they came back like they wanted some more, and so I had to punch them. And that's how, I messed up my hand. Now, when I was telling this, old person that I used to talk to, somebody I used to know, but when I was talking to them, they did not show any empathy whatsoever. In fact, they were the judge. Well, I don't know if that was right, that you should have done that or not. Well, there have been other times when I got beat up, and she didn't think that I did. So if I'm the one fighting, if I'm the one getting beat up, it's all wrong to her. Right? I'm wrong regardless if I'm right or wrong. It doesn't matter. I'm just always wrong according to her. But when I asked, well, imagine if it was your friend, right? This little scared little woman is there, and a big man comes in and is threatening, and she hits him with a frying pan. So she didn't just punch him, but knocks him out with a frying pan. She said, well, she would be a hero, clearly. The man sees a woman spending hours cooking, washing dishes, and cleaning. It never occurs to him that such jobs probably make her quite happy, since they are exactly at her mental level. Instead, he assumes that this drudgery prevents her from doing all those things which he himself considers worthwhile and desirable. Therefore, he invents automatic dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, and pre-cooked foods to make her life easier and to allow her to lead the dream life he himself longs for. But he will be disappointed, rarely using the time she has gained to take an active interest in history, politics, or astrophysics. Woman bakes cakes, irons underclothes, and makes ruffles and frills for blouses, or if she is especially enterprising, covers her bathroom with flower decals. It is natural, therefore, that man assumes such things to be the essential ingredients of gracious living. There are reasons why yet another women's liberation movement has failed. The enemies they fought were really friends, and the real enemy remained undetected. Once again, the fixed idea of sexual solidarity under the circumstances, a solidarity with a syndicate at best, misled women to the wrong strategy, and they were not aware of it. Their struggle was aided almost exclusively by men. You ever noticed how it seems like every feminist has a boyfriend? She's got a man? Okay. So, are they the enemy or what? So they live under the delusion that they're persecuted by men. They mistook the flexibility of men for a sign of female strength and screamed that much louder. And nobody got offended. From the New York Times to the Christian Science Monitor, from Playboy to Newsweek. From Playboy to Newsweek. From Kissinger to McGovern, everybody was for women's liberation. No marches of men were organized against them. Nobody prevented their demonstrations, and none of them were taken to task for their unending defamation of men. A Senator Joe McCarthy oppressing women's liberation was missing. The FBI did not lift a finger against them. Just as their predecessors, the suffragettes, secured the right to vote for women within a short period, a right they left unused by not electing women to political power and by not stopping war. Women's liberation saw most of their demands fulfilled immediately. The outrageous inequalities of the land had, after all, been established by men for women's protection. But the ladies themselves did not see it that way, and when they insisted on change, within months they succeeded. The right of a waitress to work night shifts, the right of a woman mechanic to carry heavy-duty equipment, the right to pay alimony to men, the right to use her own surname, and with that, the right for a wife to act as a solely responsible legal person, the right to military service, the right to fight in a war, and etc. Women have them all. They got all the rights. Infected by this wave of general generosity, even the government did not want to be left behind. In the future, it proclaimed government contracts will be given out only to those companies who do not discriminate against women willing to work. But the army of suppressed women eagerly awaiting that moment of liberation simply never materialized. As soon as the first American woman had climbed a telephone pole, the first female plumber, construction worker, and furniture mover had been photographed, and the photos printed in newspapers all over the world. The uproar died down. Why should it have gone any further? After all, it is not much fun to repair water pipes, to lay bricks, or to lug furniture. Unlike the aid of skillfully applied cosmetics designed to preserve that precious baby look, with the aid of helpless, appealing babble and exclamations such as, "Oh," and "ah," to denote astonishment, surprise, and admiration with inane little bursts of conversations, women have preserved this baby look for as long as possible so as to make the world continue to believe in the darling, sweet little girl she once was. And she relies on the protective instinct in man to make him take care of her. As with everything a woman undertakes on her own initiative, this whole maneuver is as incredible as it is stupid. It is amazing, in fact, that it succeeds. It would appear very short-sighted to encourage such an ideal of beauty. For how can any woman hope to maintain it beyond the age of 25? Despite every trick of the cosmetics industry, despite magazine advice against thinking or laughing, both tend to create wrinkles, her actual age will inevitably show through in the end. And what on earth is a man to do with a grown-up face when he has been manipulated into considering only helpless, appealing little girls to be creatures of beauty? What is a man to do with a woman? What is a man to do with a woman when the smooth curves have become flabby tires of flesh, the skin slack and pallid, when the childish tones have grown shrill and the laughter sounds like neighing? What is to become of this shrew when her face no longer atones for her ceaseless inanities, and when the cries of oh, ooh, and ah begin to drive him out of his mind? This mummified child will never fire a man's erotic fantasy again. One might think her power broken at last. But she still manages to get her own way, and for two reasons. The first is obvious. She now has children who enable her to continue feigning helplessness. As for the second, there are simply not enough young women to go around. So it's a safe bet that given the choice, man would trade in his grown-up child wife for a younger model. But as the ratio between the sexes is roughly equal, not every man can have a younger woman. And as he has to have a wife of some sort, he prefers to keep the one he already possesses. Now let's talk about a poor man versus a rich man. So even if he got a good personality, good sense of humor, but he doesn't have money, if offered a rich man of 40, a woman would certainly prefer him to a poor man of 20. Women certainly know what they want from men and know exactly on which side their bread is buttered. It's lucky for the adult woman that men do not consider themselves beautiful, since most men are beautiful. Their smooth bodies, kept trim by hard work, their strong shoulders, their muscular legs, their melodic voices, their warm human laughter, the intelligent expression of their faces, and their calibrated, meaningful movements overshadow those of women completely, even in a purely animal sense. And since they, unlike women, work, and their bodies are therefore preserved for continued use, men also retain their beauty longer as a result of their inertia. Women's bodies rapidly decay, and after the age of 50, they are nothing but indifferent heaps of human cells. One only has to observe a 50-year-old housewife on the street and compare her appearance with that of a man of the same age. Men are not aware of their own beauty, and nobody mentions it. There is so much rubbish written and talked about the charm of women. Even children and animals are considered graceful, adorable, delightful. never a man. Men are at best praised for their steadfastness, courage, reliability, all qualities useful to women. Having nothing to do with physical appearance, it would be difficult to find a description of the male body except in a medical textbook, and outside of these, who would ever dream of going into detail about the exact shape of his lips, the precise shade of his eyes, and a special kind of light? And as for the delicacy of his nipples or the pleasing shape of his scrotum and his testicles, just imagine a man's amazement and amusement if he were the subject of the hymns of praise. Men are not used to having their looks discussed. Grown women, as a rule, ugly creatures, have time and opportunity to admire men, but rarely see them. It is not that a woman is mean or envious. It is that she thinks of him as a machine for the production of material goods. And who regards a machine as an object of beauty? It is man, unlike woman, is beautiful, because man, unlike woman, is a thinking creature. This means man has a thirst for knowledge. He wants to know what the world around him looks like and how it functions. Man thinks. He draws conclusions from the data he encounters. Man is creative. He makes something new out of the information achieved by the above processes. Man is sensitive. As a result of his exceptionally wide, multidimensional emotional scale, he not only registers the commonplace in fine gradations, but he creates and discovers new emotional values and makes them accessible to others through sensible descriptions, or recreates them as an artist. Of all the qualities of man, his curiosity is certainly the most impressive. This curiosity differs basically from that of woman. A woman takes interest only in subjects that have an immediate personal usefulness to her. For example, if she reads a political article in the his curiosity is something quite different. His desire for knowledge has no personal implications. It's purely objective, and in the long run, it's much more practical than a woman's attitude. One only has to watch a man go past a building site where a newly developed machine is being used. For example, a new kind of dredger. There is hardly a man, regardless of social status, who will pass by without a glance. Many will stop to have a good look and discuss the characteristics of the new machine, its advantages and disadvantages, and its differences from previous models. A woman would never think of stopping at a building site unless, of course, the crowd was so big she thought that she might miss something exciting, like a construction worker being crushed by a bulldozer. And if that happened, she would want to know all the details and then look the other way. Man's curiosity is universal. There is almost nothing that does not interest him, whether it's politics, botany, nuclear physics, or God knows what. Even subjects out of his province hold his interest, such as bottling fruit, preparing cake mix, or caring for a baby. And a man cannot be pregnant for months without knowing all the functions of the placenta and ovaries in detail. Men not only observe the world around them, it is in their nature to make comparisons and to apply the knowledge they have gained elsewhere, with the ultimate aim to transform this newfound knowledge into something else, something new, something useful. One need not emphasize the fact that practically all inventions and discoveries in this world have been made by men, and not only in the fields of electricity, aerodynamics, gynecology, cybernetics, mathematics, quantum mechanics, hydraulics, the origin of species. In addition, men have devised the principles of child psychology and infant nutrition, as well as pasteurization and other means of preserving food. Even the changes in women's fashions or other such trivial matters as the creation of new menus and palatal nuances are traditionally the province of men. This is to have an unusual culinary treat. Generally, one will not find it at home, but at a restaurant where, of course, the chef is male. A woman's sense of taste is so blunted and deadened by the repetitive preparation of the unimaginative, run-of-the-mill, tasteless, everyday cooking that even if she wanted to try out new foods, she would not be capable of it. There is no female gourmet. Women are good for almost nothing. With his many gifts, man would appear to be ideally suited both mentally and physically to lead a life both fulfilled and free. Instead, he chooses to become a slave, placing his many discoveries at the service of those who are incapable of creation themselves, at the service of mankind, man's own synonym for women, and of the children of these women. How paradoxical that this very sex, which is capable of leading a life as nearly perfect as possible, is prepared to give it up to offer it all to the female sex, which is interested in such perfection. We have grown so accustomed to the blunted mechanism of one-sided exploitation of one group of human beings by a parasitic clique that all of our moral values have completely that have become completely perverted. Without giving the matter any thought, we consider the male sex as a kind of Sisyphus. He's come in the world to learn, to work. If a young man gets married and starts a family and spends the rest of his life working at a soul-destroying job, he is held up as an example of virtue and responsibility. The other type of man, living only for himself, working only for himself, doing first one thing and then another simply because he enjoys it and because he has to keep only himself, sleeping where and when he wants, and facing woman when he meets her on equal terms and not as one of a million slaves, is rejected by society. The free, unshackled man has no place in its midst. How depressing it is to see men year after year betraying all that they were born to do. New worlds could be discovered. Worlds he could discover. Worlds one hardly dares even to dream of could be opened by the mind, strength, and intelligence of men. Things to make life fuller and richer, their own life, that is, of which women are ignorant and more worthwhile, could be developed. All these things could be done by men. Instead, they forsake all these tremendous potentials and permit their minds and their bodies to be shunted into sightings to serve the repulsively primitive needs of women. Man has the key to every mystery of the universe in his hand, but he ignores it. He lowers himself to the level of woman and insinuates himself into her favor. With his mind, his strength, and his imagination, all intended for the creation of new worlds, he opts instead for the preservation and improvement of the old. And if he happens to invent something new, he needs to prefix it with the excuse that it will be one day useful to all of mankind. To women, he has absolutely no idea what the world would be like if men really used their intelligence and imagination instead of wasting it. Inventing pressure cookers that cook faster, wall-to-wall carpeting that is more stain-resistant, detergents that wash whiter, and lipsticks that are more water-resistant is a waste of time. Instead of producing children who will in turn produce children, thus pushing the enjoyment of life still further out of their own reach, they should try living themselves. Instead of probing the depth of woman's mysterious psyche, mysterious only because there is nothing behind it, they should study their own psyche, perhaps even that of creatures possibly inhabiting other planets, and think of new ways and means of establishing contact with them instead of inventing ever more deadly weapons to fight wars destined to defend private property, i.e. women's. They should be developing ever more efficient methods of space travel, which would tell us more about the worlds we never dreamed of. Unfortunately, men who are capable and willing to work and think in every other field of research have declared everything concerning woman taboo. What is worse is that this taboo has always been so effective that it is no longer recognized as such. Without thinking, men fight women's wars, father women's children, and construct women's towns. Women just sit back, getting lazier, dumber, and more demanding, and at the same time richer. A primitive but effective system of insurance policies for marriage, divorce, inheritance, widowhood, old age, and life ensures this increasing wealth. Half of the total private capital is in the hands of women in America. Yet the number of working women have constantly decreased over the last decade. The situation is not much different in industrial Europe. At this time, women already have complete biological control, psychological control. It won't be long before women have psychological control, complete psychological control over men, and it won't be long before they have material control as well. Men seem to be quite unaware of these facts and go on finding happiness in their own subjugation. There could be justification for their attitude only if women really were the charming, gracious creatures men believed them to be. Fairy princesses, angels from another world, too good for men themselves and for this earthly existence. It's quite incredible that men whose desire for knowledge knows no bounds in every other field are really totally blind to these facts, and that they're incapable of seeing women as they really are. With nothing else to offer but a vagina, two breasts, and some punch cards programmed with idle stereotyped chatter. They are nothing more than the conglomerations of matter, lumps of stuffed human skin pretending to be thinking human beings. If men would only stop for a moment in their blind productivity and think, they could easily tear the mask off these creatures with their thinking bracelets, frilly blouses, and gold leather sandals. Surely it would take them only a couple of days, considering their own intelligence, imagination, and determination, to construct a machine, a kind of human female robot to take the place of woman, for there is nothing original in her, neither inside nor out, which could not be replaced. Why are men so afraid to face the truth? Her stupidity makes woman divine. Only the oppressed have any real need of freedom, yet as soon as they are free and providing they have the intelligence to weigh their freedom against the possible consequences, this need changes. The former longing for freedom reverts to a sense of fear, accompanied by an intense longing to be tied and secure. In the first years of life, man is never free. He is hemmed in by adult rules, and having no experience of social conduct to guide him, he is not afraid of death because it cannot imagine it. There is no need to find a meaning or reason for life. Its desires are fulfilled in its own personal comforts, and these provide reason enough for living. Even the need for religion is comparatively unknown to a person of low intelligence, and if it does arise, it is very easily satisfied. A stupid person has an infinite capacity for self-adoration. If a woman chooses to believe in God, it is only for one reason only. She wants to go to heaven. And what, after all, is the dear Lord but yet another man who will arrange things for her? The situation of the intelligent person, i.e. a man, is very different. At first, he welcomes his newfound freedom with a sense of relief, drunk with the vision and perspective of life before him. But the moment he puts this freedom to the test, that is, as soon as he wants to commit a given act which might send him in a given direction, he gets scared. Since he is capable of abstract thought, he knows that each of his acts has a series of possible consequences. Vilar, everybody. Esther Vilar. I saw this one debate. It was in German, but they had English subtitles where she was debating a leading feminist in Germany. And she did a really good job. She was laid back and confident, and she was fun, and she was interesting. Her main point was that she is a feminine feminist, whereas these other feminists have been masculine feminists. They are trying to emulate men, and by emulating men, they are actually reinforcing the very institutions that they are trying to destroy. So the lady called her, Esther Vilar, a fascist because she is saying that, well, you're degrading all women. And she's saying, no, I'm not degrading all women. I'm putting a more honest perspective on what is actually going on. If women are so persecuted, how come they haven't risen up, and threw off their shackles? Perhaps there's some silver lining with the intimately oppressed. Maybe it's not oppression. Maybe they're the ones doing the oppressing. Ladies threatened to sue her, almost sue you, so that's a very fascist thing to do. If you can't get your way, if you can't, change somebody's mind, and you threaten them, with some kind of lawsuit, waste their time and shit, ruin their reputation. So a threat, well, that's a very fascist thing to do. She's sitting there saying that she's the fascist when actually it was that feminist who was the fascist. And when I think about fascism and I think about slavery, let's assume that Esther Vilar's theory is correct, that women aren't the oppressed one, but there's actually an intricate system of oppression that women use to manipulate men. Men are the oppressed. Let's assume that that's true. So from the time that they're 16 years old to the time that they're 65, men are going to have to work for, the better half, his better half, the fairer sex. Well, that's slavery. That's massive amounts of slavery. You want to talk about fascism? Well, that's fascism. It looks like Esther Vilar. So Esther Vilar, she was born Esther Margareta Katzin, September 16th, 1935 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And Esther Vilar is an Argentine-German writer. She trained and practiced as a medical doctor before she established herself as an author. She's known for her book, The Manipulated Man, and its various follow-ups, which argue that contrary to common feminist and women's rights rhetoric, women in industrialized culture are not oppressed, but exploit a well-established system of manipulating men. They exploit a well-established system of manipulating men. She still feels her views on gender issues to be underrepresented in popular culture, but has let it go, preferring to not repeat herself and focus in her non-fiction efforts on the no less man who wants to gain power over a woman must follow the example of women and condition his sex drive. If he succeeds in becoming as cold as she can no longer bait him with sex into the role of provider. At most, she could offer herself as an equal sex partner, as dependent on him as he is on her. If men could abstain from sex at judicious intervals, they might even succeed in normalizing the female sex drive, even make women desire them more than the other way around. Male's aggressiveness consists in asking a woman to have intercourse and waiting for her to say yes or a definite no. Skillful tacticians enhance their chances of making out by distributing their attentions among several women at a time, playing the field, thus increasing their statistical chances for a favorable answer depending on circumstances. This is the height of male aggressiveness that is tolerated. Consists in making oneself the goal of another person's social instincts without seeking to satisfy one's own social instincts through him. The other then does everything one asks. Powerlessness consists in wanting or having to satisfy one's social instincts through another person whose social instincts one has not succeeded in concentrating on oneself. One then does everything the other asks. A friend or an enemy can tell me something about my subjective being. A casual lover can judge my body. The man I love judges my entire being. Every one of his caresses tells me how I am, attractive, desirable. Every one of his questions and answers tells me what I am, a person with whom he wants to enjoy himself, who interests him more than all the others he knows. By choosing me among all others, my love has made me unique. I alone in the world am the one he loves and no other. If I am lucky in love, the definitions after each date, I know better than before what I want to know about myself. The definitions become more precise. The others can say what they like about me. I don't believe a word of it. Only the one I love can tell me about myself. Since his definitions grow increasingly precise, my dependence on him also grows more acute as time goes on, but he is in the same position with regard to me. I tell him that I belong to him alone and that he can do with me what he likes, that I cannot live without him. Esther Vilar, man, she's wrote a whole bunch of books. She's wrote, a bunch of German books. The Polygamous Sex, Alt ud, El Discurso Inaugural de Papisa Americana, the inaugural address of the American Papist, and Man's Right to the Other Woman. She has a series of books. The End of the Manipulation,